the conversation that's going on about how this will work, logistics. Some of the concerns are that increased time for closings, that everybody thinks that it's going to take longer to actually conduct a closing. Additional time will be needed to explain the form. If the CFPB, if it works the way the CFPB wants, they are expecting the borrower to have their loan estimate form there too. So you may have sort of a side-by-side conversation with the two forms, explaining any differences, explaining the nuances to the borrower. The impact of the 3-day rule. A lot of people are very concerned about how this will work. And I think nobody really knows until we really get into it and we start to do these closings. And it's going to vary from lender to lender. How this 3-day rule is going to work, and the questions about will you keep your staff there late at night to get it in 3 days before the closing if the lender doesn't send the package or the instruction until the last minute. Those are all going to be business decisions that are going to be worked out, I think, by individual lenders and settlement providers among themselves as you're doing business with them. A lot of people wonder what will happen by providing that closing disclosure so early. Is that going to actually eliminate questions at the closing table? I would be very surprised if that were the case. It may actually increase inquiries, and I think there's some concern that it will increase inquiries before the closing. So will you actually conduct a closing before the closing, or have a telephone conversation with a borrower to explain the document prior to the actual consummation, the actual closing? Again, a lot of these questions and concerns that are going on about this rule. I think it's clear that we can expect longer closings, or that certainly that initially that closings will take longer. So that may impact, of course, your business, the fewer closings that you can do per day. And that may, in fact, increase the cost, because you may have to charge more if the number of closings that you can transact in one day is reduced. And next slide. And Mary can certainly jump in on this. The substantial technology changes, everybody's been talking about this aspect of it. There were the changes that came in 2010. So many people were concerned about that, and really when we look back on that and think about how different the 2010 was from the other, looking back on that, it doesn't really seem like it was that big of a change. This is going to be a much bigger change. And so a lot of concern by folks all over the industry is the cost of the implementation. We just did overhaul all of our systems and software in 2009. By eliminating the 1100 series for title, and the changing of how that's going to look and how that's going to the roll-up now will be no longer rolled up. The fact that the lines, even though we do have those a little bit of numbering, we don't have those distinct lines for distinct services anymore. So no longer will we have those pre-printed templates with some of those fees. It'll be the way the lender wants it, and as it's been discussed earlier by Mary and Ben, the alphabetizing of the fees as the lender wants it. So hopefully we will, the industry will sort of come to some naming standards for some of these fees, but until that happens, each closing disclosure will be different, and the placing of the fees on the lines will be different for every single transaction. Employee training is another question, another issue about how much training it will take for your staff. This is a completely new form, so it's not just a matter of sitting down at the software once the new software comes out, whatever your software provider is, but there's going to be substantial training on how to fill this out. And hopefully everybody will start this early. My firm has been trying to decide at what point do we begin to introduce these forms to our staff. Worry about whether you overload them if you start too soon, but then you don't want to start too late and have them not be prepared for the new forms and how the software, because once the software comes out, I personally want my staff to be pretty well versed in the forms, so that once the software does come out, it's not going to be so terrible learning the new forms, because they'll already be very familiar with the forms. So start deciding when you want to do that, and start thinking about at what point you want to start training your staff on the new forms.